Hello, my name is Sarah Holland, and I did my research project on symbolic interactionism, a communication theory. Symbolic interactionism is founded by George Herbert Mead and coined by his student Herbert Bloomer. These two were the ones that established and decided that this was a huge part of the communication theory. But before one can understand symbolic interactionism as a theory, you must understand the framework from which it comes. And that framework is found under the sociocultural tradition. Littlejohn and Foss define this as sociocultural approaches to communication theory address the ways our understandings, meanings, norms, roles are worked out interactively in communication. Essentially, this means that our surroundings, the people that are influencing us in our lives, our culture and our background, define the realities in our lives. And this is seen throughout symbolic interactionism. Another quote is, "People communicate according to the dictates of their culture, and in turn, through communication, culture is manifested, specified, and developed." This basically means that communication cannot be found without culture, and culture cannot be found without communication. When defining symbolic interactionism, the definition was found in the International Encyclopedia of Family and Marriage, and it says, "The central theme of symbolic interactionism is that human life is lived in symbolic domain. Symbols are culturally derived social objects having shared meanings that are created and maintained in social interaction. Through language and communication, symbols provide the means by which reality is constructed." Basically, the most basic form of symbolic interactionism is that everything is an object or a symbol. Everything is symbolized by something or a meaning that is defined through that culture. This is seen in the object itself, self-defined as an object, orientational others, role-taking, and social acts, which we will define throughout the rest of the presentation. The first one to define when understanding symbolic interactionism is the object itself. An object can be an aspect of a person's reality, a thing, a quality, an event, or a state of affairs. The only requirement for something to become an object is that the person must name it or represent it symbolically. And this is found in Littlejohn and Foss as well. Basically, what this is saying is anything, like I said, in life is an object if you symbolize it by something, which essentially everything is symbolized. And there's simple objects like trees, plants, and animals, and there's also complex objects like emotions, events, and gestures. The simple objects can be symbolized differently in different cultures. For example, the tree can mean a shade, or it can mean food, or it can mean a structure or a shelter. Complex objects are also seen in different cultures as well. For example, emotions can be seen, if you're angry and straight-faced, it could be seen as anger, or it could be just seen as content. And gestures are also a big difference between cultures in the way that they're defined. For example, of this is a kiss. In American culture, a kiss is representative of intimacy and love, whereas in France it can be a representative, symbolic of a greeting. When understanding symbolic interactionism, the most influential factor of this is called orientational others. These are people that are influential in your life that help define those objects in which you find definitions and realities. Littlejohn and Foss also describe this as, "Certain other people termed orientational others are particularly influential in a person's life. They are people to whom we are emotionally and psychologically committed. Orientational others, like parents, provide us with general vocabulary, central concepts, and categories that come to define our realities. These are the people we spend the most time with. These are the people that we have examples from who help define those objects. They're influential relationships, such as parents and teachers or close relatives, like explained in the quote. And they're also from the same community or culture or background. And this is saying that the brunt of the framework sociocultural tradition does affect everything that we define. The next part of symbolic interactionism is the definition of self. The self, the me, the I, is defined as an object in this theory, which is hard to understand at first, but when you think about the way people subject themselves through different roles or different emotions, you can see this as an object. The International Encyclopedia of Marriage and Family explains this as, along with symbols, meanings, and interaction, the self is a basic concept in symbolic interactionism. The essential feature of the self is that it is a reflexive phenomenon. Reflexivity enables humans to act towards themselves as objects, or to reflect on themselves, argue with themselves, evaluate themselves, and so forth. The self is evaluated and established as an object. It's evaluated by ordering variables and locus variables. Ordering variables are basically, for example, in the text, it mentions if someone defines themselves as a Baptist versus a father, it means that they have more meaning for religion than a parental role. This is something of a role that they take. Locus variables is seen as whether you categorize yourself as an object of a group or individual. And then it is evolved and influenced by the culture, and that is the definition of self. Role-taking is the next step of symbolic interactionism. It is seen through self-identities, which is defined previously, interaction with culture or group, and the influence of that culture or group. This quote says, "These identities are built up fundamentally through ongoing processes of interaction, through participating in organized groups, leading to recurrent role-taking involving those groups. Commitments to group roles are built up, and corresponding identities are established." This is seen as the objects of a leader versus a follower, for example. If a self is defined as an object of a leader, they will automatically step up into that role. And the community and the culture will influence that role as well, and the same with the followers. Role-taking is a huge part of symbolic interactionism. And this leads to the next act, or the next part of symbolic interactionism, which is social acts. This is the relational aspect of the symbol. Littlejohn and Foss say, in its most basic form, a social act involves a three-part relationship: an initial gesture from one individual, a response to that gesture by another, and a result. The result is what the act means for the communicators. Meaning does not reside solely in one of those things, but in the triadic relationship of all three. When it comes to language and objects, language is an object in itself, and it is seen in a way as gestures are symbolized and they are communicated and evaluated. And that is how relationships are formed. Learning outcomes is something that I found through my research, and it is a huge part of symbolic interactionism. From this perspective, learning and development occur on two planes. First on a social plane, interaction with others, and then on a psychological plane, within the learner or the researcher. This is seen in childhood development and adulthood development. It is seen through flashcards, for example, because one can have an object of a dog and the other can have the answer, and that is how a child learns. And it is also seen in organizational learning, through the way a group learns together to complete a task. The last part of symbolic interactionism is the challenges. The key point here is that learning environments change. The available mediational tools and signs that impact cognitive functioning also change. And as highlighted in this chapter, adult learning environments are currently undergoing substantial transformation. Essentially, communication and symbols are constantly changing depending on the background. And one example of this is the gender role. In this generation, some communities don't define gender as male and female, where in Christian cultures, like we are, we see it as a God-given design, one versus the other, but it is not significant to other cultures or definitions. All in all, this is the concept of symbolic interactionism. The symbols that we see and define are defined by culture and our surroundings. Thank you.